All right, say good morning, good morning. What is Chus Baruch Hashem? To be back at it. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Haba Alinu Litova, Benjamin and Ali Swall of Eretz Yisrael, who are proud to sponsor and the incredible worldwide work that the SOTC family does on behalf of the entire Jewish people. Our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, in memory of Paul's grandfather, Samuel Pollack, Zechariah ben Zechariah. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Sav and Aliyah, all those who need a refuah shavim together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, L'sh Baruch Hu Shem Yirtz Hashem Mamish, make this a month of Mishenichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha. With that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. I don't even know what daf it is today. I'm gonna tell you where we're gonna pick up. Today's daf is Mem Hey Yirtz Hashem 45. All right, we are picking up on Mem Daled Amud Aleph. This might be a new record, by the way, 44a, and we left off right by the first wide line on the bottom of the daf. Actually, the last two words on the last short line. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Talis Shu'ula, if you borrow a talis. Now, remember again, in this context means you're borrowing a four-cornered garment. The first 30 days that you borrow it, it is pater from tzitzis. Now, again, what that means is the obligation to affix tzitzis to a borrowed garment, you have the first 30 days to be able to do it. Mikan ve'ilech, from that point forward, chayeves. After 30 days, you're obligated to go ahead and put tzitzis on it. That supports this. Hadar bepundiki be'eretz Yisrael. If you live in an inn in Eretz Yisrael, or hasocher bayis b'chutz la'aretz, or you go ahead and you rent a home in chutz la'aretz, kol shloshim yom pater min hamezuzah. For the first 30 days of the rental, you're pater from mezuzah. And I will say, now again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't put up the mezuzah in the first 30 days. It just means you have 30 days in which to put up the mezuzah. Mikan ve'elech, from that point forward, chayiv, you're obligated to put up a mezuzah. Interesting halacha, aval hasocher bayis be'eretz Yisrael. However, this idea of 30 days, a 30-day window to put up your mezuzah, is dafka if you're renting a home in chutz la'aretz. However, if you're renting a home in Eretz Yisrael, osa mezuzah li alter, you should put up your mezuzah immediately. Why mishum yishuv Eretz Yisrael? Ultimately, again, because in order to facilitate habitation of Eretz Yisrael. Now, what does that mean? Rashi says it's actually very beautiful. Rashi says, "Mishum yishuv Eretz Yisrael, de la'achar shekava shuv eina notla, mishum afilu yotze mimenu." And I will say what this means is like this. Once you live in a home in Eretz Yisrael, even if you're subsequently moving from that home, leaving that home, you are not allowed to take down your mezuzah. I will say, what's the idea? Because in Eretz Yisrael, we want the home to be rented as quickly as possible. So apparently, again, on the Eretz Yisrael market, a home with mezuzahs gets rented much faster than a home without mezuzahs. So in order to facilitate a quick turnover of homes, in Eretz Yisrael, even if it's a rental, you have to leave the mezuzahs on the home ultimately when you leave. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, if you rent a home, you have to put up your mezuzahs immediately as well. Now, I'll just point out two very interesting halachas over here. First of all, you see how important settling and inhabiting Eretz Yisrael is, right? That Chazal even changed the laws of mezuzah just in order to facilitate, expedited Eretz Yisrael rentals. But two important halachas. So I'll say people often get a little bit confused over here. This 30-day window to put up your mezuzah is only by rentals. If you purchase a home, the obligation to put the mezuzahs is immediately. There's no window. Obviously, again, you have to get the mezuzahs. But 30 days is dafka by rental, not by a purchase. You purchase, chovas hadar, there's an obligation to put the mezuzahs up, at least on the front door, immediately. When you leave your home. So here's what's interesting in Eretz Yisrael. So you see what Rashi is pointing out over here is that when you leave your home, you are obligated to leave the mezuzahs there, right? In order to go ahead and facilitate expedited rental to the next person, because again, a home with mezuzahs on it is going to be more desirable. The halacha is, in general, when you are leaving your home, you're obligated to leave your mezuzahs there. If the next person, whether it's a renter or a buyer, is Jewish, then halacha l'maisa, again, you should go ahead and leave the mezuzahs there. Now, again, this is a halacha. Now, you're not obligated to leave it for free. In other words, the person who's coming in is obligated to pay you replacement value for those mezuzahs. But halacha l'maisa, again, if I know that there's another Jewish buyer or another Jewish renter, it is my obligation to give them right of first refusal on those mezuzos. Incredible. Tefillah shayad ein makev. So as I say, now back to the Mishnah. Remember again, the Mishnah said that if you have the tefillin shayad, it's not ma'akev the tefillin shalosh, which means if you only have one of them, you should put on the one that you have. Amar Rav Chisda, this is very interesting. Lo shanu ela sheyesh lo. So both say this is fascinating. When do we say that the tefillin shal yad is not ma'akev the tefillin shal rosh, or vice versa? The tefillin shal rosh is not ma'akev the tefillin shal yad. In other words, that if you have one, put on the one that you have. So the Gemara Rav Chisda says that's only if you actually have the other as well. Aval ein lo, but if you don't have the other one, let's say you only have a tefillin shal yad, and you don't have a shal rosh, then Rav Chisda says, if lo ma'keves, then you would not put the other one on. So Rav saying this is fascinating. So Rav Chisda says like this: when do we say that one is not ma'akev the other? Listen to this: when you have both. But if you only have one, then they are ma'akev each other, and you would not put it on. Strange. The Gemara says, Amr lo, this is great. Amr lo amrit. So they said, Rav Chisda, did you say that? Amr lahu, lo. It's like, no, no, not me. Ella man delesle trey mitzvah, chad mitzvah namilo li'avid, because intuitively it doesn't make sense, right? Intuitively, halacha l'maisa, if you can't perform two mitzvahs, you shouldn't perform one. In other words, the logic is do what you can. Do what you can. I was supposed to remember again, we spoke about this a few days ago, the fundamental difference between tzitzis and tefillin. By tzitzis, if you have a four-cornered garment, but all you have is 3 sets of strings, what do you do? Either find another set of strings or don't wear the garment. Tzitzis is all or nothing. All or nothing. Tefillin, on the other hand, the Gemara says, is not all or nothing. The shalyad and the shalosh are 2 different mitzvahs. Salocha l'maisa, again, the logic is even if you don't have 2, at least do 1. So right. And also when we spoke about this, these are 2 different paradigms in Yiddishkeit. There are things in life, or just not just in Yiddishkeit, in life, there are things in life where you just got to get the job done. And half measures simply are meaningless, and they're meaningless. On the other hand, those are like the tzitzis buckets in life. And then there are tefillin buckets in life. Tefillin buckets in life where my avoda is to try. And whatever results I could produce are fantastic. Even if I can't ultimately cross the finish line, there's still meaning in it. So I said to Rav Chisda, I don't understand. Shal yad and shal rosh are 2 separate mitzvahs. So halacha l'maisa, do the one that you can. Umeikara ma'asavar. So why is it that at least initially Rav Chisda thought that halacha l'maisa, if you don't have both, you can't even do one? This is very interesting. The concern of Osei was because of pshia, because of negligence. Meaning what? This is actually fascinating. Rav Chisda was constructed, meikara. The havamina was like this. If we tell people that you could just put on one, the shal yad, the shal rosh, then what may happen? People, when purchasing tefillin from the beginning, may say, you know what? I'm just going to buy one. I got it. Ideally, I should buy 2, right? But Lamais, I found a good deal, on a shal rosh. Let's start with that. Right, let's start with that, and then we'll go from there. Rav Chisda, the havamina was like this: tell people that yes, b'di eved, if you put on one, you are yotze, provided that you own both. But that way, again, you ensure that every yid gets a full set of tefillin. And if you only have one, you're not yotze with one. Kamash malan, and again, all of that was to avoid a sense of negligence of a person mitchila only buying one of either the tefillin shad or tefillin shalosh. Kamash malan, whether you own both, you own one. If you put on one, you do have that mitzvah b'diavad. So the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rav Sheshes, kol she'enu maniach tefillin over b'shmona aseh. Rav Sheshes says as follows: if a person goes ahead and doesn't put on tefillin, they're in violation of 8 positive commandments. Okay, Rashi goes through them. Whoever doesn't put tzitzis on his clothing is in violation of 5 assays. Now, again, remember, you're only in violation of those assays provided that you are wearing a 4-cornered garment. Obviously, if a person doesn't wear tzitzis, not wearing a 4-cornered garment, you're missing out on a mitzvah, but there's not per se a violation. Any kohen who doesn't go up the duchen, the Gemara says over begimal asay is in violation of 3 positive commandments. Kol she'en lo mezuzah b'pischo, whoever doesn't have a mezuzah on his doorway, over b'shnei asay, ultimately is in violation of 2 positive commandments. Uksavtem. I just point out something absolutely amazing. If you notice the common denominator over here, tefillin, tzitzis, duchening mezuzah. So again, what is the Gemara saying? You're over on aseis. What does that tell you? There's no prohibitions over here associated. So all too often, our Yiddishkeit becomes about the avoidance of sin, which, by the way, is great. We should definitely all strive for that, right? But that's what it becomes all about: avoidance of sin. But we forget that there's such a beautiful element of Yiddishkeit, of kumaseh, of engaging in positive dynamic opportunity and activity. And so many things around us, each and every day, we have all of these opportunities for positive, dynamic, spiritual growth. Tefillin, tzitzis, mezuzah, okay, in Eretz Yisrael, if you're a Kohen, duchening every single day. Life is filled with these incredible and beautiful opportunities. It behooves us to keep our eyes open and to take advantage. Amr Reish Lakish, such a beautiful Gemara. Kol maniach tefillin ma'arich yomim. Whoever goes ahead and is maniach tefillin, ultimately puts on tefillin, has longevity of days. Shene'emar amud days, Hashem aleim yichyu ulechol bahen chaye ruchi fatach limeni v'hachayeni. So both the Gemara recording the pasuk from Yeshayahu, and ultimately again, when Hashem is alehem, the Gemara's understanding is a reference to tefillin. Rashi says over here, Osan shenosim aleim shem Hashem b'tefillin yichyu. Ultimately, again, so anyone who's tefillin, remember we saw this before, when you're wearing tefillin, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is upon you. So anyone who puts on tefillin, who wears tefillin every single day, the Shem Hashem is on him. And what does the pasuk say? When the name of God is on you, what happens? Yichyu. Yichyu. I'll point out something interesting. I've always found it fascinating that the Gemara, whenever it refers to the mitzvah of tefillin, sometimes it refers to it as levisha, as wearing. But more often than not, it refers to as hanacha, placement. So remember, there's also a nuanced difference between levisha and hanacha. Levisha means to wear something, but wearing something lav dafka means that anything is sinking in. Maniach, hanacha, means something is actually placed and remains in place. So perhaps also what the Gemara is teaching us is as follows. The mitzvah of tefillin is not just about levisha, it's not just about wearing it. It's about hanacha. Hanacha means that there's something about the act that's permeating me. So the Gemara says, what's the pshat? Kol maniach tefillin ma'arich yom. So we've seen this many times throughout our journeys in Shas. Whenever Chazal give a promise of longevity, longevity is not necessarily measured in we call it the length of biological days. Arichas Yomim often refers to quality of life. Quality of life. And Chazal are telling us, if you allow the message of tefillin to permeate you, then ultimately, again, you will have dramatically amazing quality of life. What is the message of tefillin? We've spoken about this so many times. Shal Yad and Shal Rosh, that connection. The Shal Rosh represents my goals, my ideals, my aspirations, my wants, all the different things, my yearnings, my she'ifas. And the Shal Yad represents the actualization of all those things. A person who takes what he believes and lives those beliefs. A person who takes his dreams and tries to the best of his ability to bring those dreams to reality. That's called not levishas tefillin, that's not wearing of tefillin, that's hanochas tefillin. There's a hanocha. Ultimately, tefillin is permeating my very being. I'm taking everything I believe, everything I want. I'm trying to bring it to life to make it happen. Such a person, Marich Yamin. Such a person ultimately, again, the biological length of life, that's up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the quality of my life, that is fundamentally and wholly up to me. Live the mitzvah of tefillin. Allow the mitzvah of tefillin to mamish permeate who and what you are, and the quality of life will be absolutely overwhelming. Let's go back. It says the Mishnah. Mishnah Bosei Amem Dalin Amud Beis. Back a little bit to Meseches Menachos. Still all beautiful and all incredible, but back a little bit now to Karbanos. The Gemara says Hasolas v'Hashem ein ma'akvenes hayayin. So it says, remember again, where the Gemara now is talking about what we call Minchas Nesachim, which we've spoken about before. Minchas Nesachim means that with a carbon, you would often have a mincha, which again is flour and oil, depending on the type of mincha, and then you would have also an nesach, wine libation. Now that together is called Minchas Nesachim, even though in reality, interestingly enough, they were offered up separately, right? The mincha would be offered up together, and then the nesachim, the wine libation, would be poured afterwards. So again, so we'll say, let's say I don't have all the ingredients. right? So let's say I have the solus, I have the flour and the oil, but I don't have the wine. Okay, so you bring what you can. So too again, if you only had the wine but didn't have the other ingredients, the mincha, also it's not ma'akev. This takes us back to our zvachim days. Remember again that, for example, in a chatas achitzon, in outer chatos, there were 4 blood applications. The Mishnah now says those blood applications are not ma'akev each other, meaning that halacha l'maisa, one blood application is fine, and even if you fail to do the rest, you have still fulfilled the mitzvah of the karban. Tan Rabbanon, umin chasam v'niskehem. So remember again, the Torah, when speaking about karbanos, says you bring karbanos along with min chasam, their mincha. Now remember, mincha, that's the flour and oil, v'niskehem, and their wine libation. So the Gemara says, havei mincha v'achar kach havei nisachim. The Rabbanan teaches, what does this mean? First, bring your mincha. In other words, there's an order. Bring the karban. After you bring the karban, then bring the mincha. That's the flour and oil. And after you bring the mincha, then your wine libation. Nisachim. Rabbi says, no. Zevach u'nisachim. A different order. Rabbi calls a different pasuk. Pasuk Gemara says, Torah says, karban and nisachim. Havei zevach v'achar kach havei nisachim. According to Rabbi, the order is karban, nisachim, mincha. So according to Tanna Kama, the order is karban, mincha, nisachim. According to Rabbi, it's karban, nisachim, mincha. Okay? The Gemara says, Rabbi nami haksiv o mincha sam v'niskehem. What does Rabbi do with the phrase mincha sam v'niskehem, which would seem to indicate that it's karban, mincha, and then nisachim? Hahumi bayi le mincha sam v'niskehem balayla o mincha sam v'niskehem afilu lemachar. So Rabbi uses this to teach us a very important pasuk, which is that what? That halacha l'maisa, although the karban, right, has a very specific window, interestingly enough, you could bring the accompanying mincha and nisachim either that night or even the next day. What do the Rabbanan do with the phrase zevach? So remember again, the Rabbanan hold that the order is karban, mincha, nisachim. What do they do with Rebbe's phrase, or the Torah's phrase of zevach u'nisachim, which would seem to indicate that the proper order is karban, nisachim, mincha? They need it for ziri. What does ziri say? Damar ziri, ein nisachim is kachin ela b'shchitas zevach. Because the Iri holds that halacha l'maisa, the nisachim only become consecrated at the time that the karban itself is slaughtered. That's from that phrase, zevach u'nisachim. Only when there's a zevach do the nesachim become kodesh. Rabbi nami mibayle lechedeziri. But where does Rabbi learn out ziri's halacha? Similarly, again, v'rabbanan nami mibayle lemincha samen iskehem balayla umincha samen iskem afil lemachar. The Rabbanan also need, where the Rabbanan learn out that halacha lemaisa, you could offer up the mincha and the nesachim even the following night or even the following day. In other words, I will say what's interesting about this is as follows. There is one point of contention between Rabbi and the Rabbanan, which is the order of karban, nisachim, and mincha, right? According to Tanakam, according to Rabbanan, it's karban, mincha, nisachim. According to Rabbi, it's karban, nisachim, mincha. That's what they argue about. But the other details of this, they actually agree on. So, for example, the notion that mincha and nisachim could be brought the following night or even the following day, everyone agrees. The notion ultimately, again, that the nisachim only become kodesh at the time that the karban is slaughtered, they all agree. So the Gemara is just trying to figure out, so where does everyone learn out all of these halachos? Ella, hainu tamad Rabbanan, rather the Rabbanan's logic. Now again, so what was the sheet of the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan hold karban, mincha, nisachim. Where do they get that from? Dichsev, ola u'mincha. Okay, because the pasuk says you do the ola and then the mincha. I have a Rabbi nami haksev ola mincha. But what does Rabbi do with that? Ella bebaim imaz. So watch this. So we'll say Ella. The mincha v'achar kach nisachim dichsev ola u'mincha. So we'll say, listen to this. Gemara reframes it. Rather, we say like this. Everyone agrees that when you are bringing your mincha and nisachim together with your karban, because also remember again, interestingly enough, there's 2 models over here. There's what we'll call the classic model, well, whatever, I don't know, classic, model 1 and model 2. Model 1 is you bring your karban, and immediately when bringing your karban, you also bring the accompanying mincha and nisachim. Model 2 is you bring the karban, and you're bringing your mincha and nisachim at some later time, that night, the next day. So the Gemara says like this. Everyone agrees that when you are bringing your mincha together with your mincha nisachim, together with your karban, that the proper order is Karban, Mincha, Nesachim. Everyone agrees with that. Okay, so kipligi, what's the machlokes? Kipligi, beboin bifnei atzman. Oh, the machlokes Rabbi says in the following case. Let's say I brought my Karban on Wednesday, and I'm bringing my Mincha and Nesachim on Thursday, which is permitted, right? So now, what is the proper order? Rabbanan Savri mideboin imazevach Mincha v'yachakach Nesachim bifnei atzman nami Mincha v'yachakach Nesachim. So the Rabbanan say like this: same order. Same order, there's one order. It doesn't make a difference whether you're bringing the mincha and the nisachim with the Karban or not bringing with the Karban. The order is always the same. Karban, mincha, nisachim. So whether you're bringing them together, you're bringing them separately, halacha l'maisa, the order remains the same. The order remains the same. On the other hand, the Rabbi on the other hand says, Rabbi hasamhu da'aidi da'aschel ba'achila, gomer la l'kula milsa da'achila. Rabbi says like this: when everything is being brought together, so then it makes sense to go to say Karban, Mincha, Nesachim. Why? Because what you do is keep it in the order of things that are consumed, right? A Karban is consumed, and therefore it makes sense to go ahead and do the Mincha next, which is also consumed, and then do Nesachim afterwards. So we do consumption, non-consumption. However, again, Aval Bifnei Atzman, but if the Mincha and Nesachim are being brought on their own, then what? Then ultimately, again, Nesachim Adifi Hol Demis Amra Shira Alaihu. Then I will say, if the Mincha and Nesachim are being brought independently, then Halacha L'maisa, we will go ahead and bring the Nesachim first. Why? Because wine is more important. Because you say Shira on wine. See how Rashi says over here, Shira is said over wine, and therefore wine, ultimately Levitic song is said over wine, and therefore again wine is going to be more important. So we'll say, so let's just reframe this for just a moment. So where the Gemara ends up is as follows. Let's start with what everybody agrees with, right? Everybody will agree that halacha l'maisa, when you are bringing the nesachim together with the Karban, the proper order is Karban, Mincha, Nesachim. The machlokes is when you're bringing the Mincha and Nesachim independently of the Karban. In that case, the Rabbanan will say, just maintain the same order. Just keep consistent. And therefore, again, you should bring the Mincha as Mincha and Nesachim. Rabbi says, no, when you're not bringing it together with the Karban, first the Nesachim go, and then ultimately again the Mincha. Why? Because wine will be more dominant than the Mincha. Why is that? Because we recite Shira, because we recite song in the Beis HaMikdash, ultimately again over wine. So we'll say that remains our fundamental machlokes. Ultimately, again, halacha l'maisa about the proper order over here. So pretty incredible. So we'll say, first of all, the halacha is this is the way that Rambam actually paskins. The Rambam paskins that I didn't see how the Rambam paskins in the second case, but in the first case, where the mincha and nesachim are being brought together with the Karban, we adopt this last approach, namely that the proper order is Karban, mincha, nesachim. They're being brought separately, then we have our machlokes, Rabbi and Rabban. I'll just point out over here that you see, according to Rabbi, the power of Shira, right? The power of song, right? And how profound and overwhelming Shira could be. So we'll say this is something so interesting. We go ahead like today. So like there's a concept of davening without Shira, right? You could daven without song, right? And so like to us, like it's a Karlbach thing. It's too much singing. It's this that. So just understand, if you're not into all that singing and davening, you're going to be in for a rude awakening when the Beis HaMikdash comes. Right? Because again, there's instruments, everything is pretty much a Karlbach Kabbalah Shabbos, and there's one big Karlbach Kabbalah Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash. But it's interesting, one of the things that we've lost throughout 2,000 years of diaspora, obviously, we don't have music per se, obviously Shabbos and Yom Tiv, but even just the notion of music as part of tefillah, sustained singing as part of tefillah, not an add-on to make it nicer, but actually it's one of the things that has been lost over 2,000 years of exile from the Beis HaMikdash. But you see over here that even Rebbe says Shira is so important that the fact that wine has Shira said over it at the end of the day propels it to a higher level of importance and significance. So Rabbi Nachman says that there are various levels in Kedusha. And the Rebbe says that sometimes the highest level of Kedusha is what he calls nigun. When a person could get to the level of nigun, a person could get to the level ultimately again of song. And he says, if you notice, by the way, nigun is different than shira, because shira has words. Nigun by itself often is just melody. Sometimes the highest level of Kedusha is melody without words. There's something that's expressed in the nigun that ultimately, again, you can't capture in anything else. In any event, let's go right there. Says the Gemara, Hamatanos, Shalom Mizbeach, Achitzon, Im Akvo Zuazu. So the blood applications on the Mizbeach. So remember again, let's say you have a chatas that has 4 blood applications. If you just did one, ultimately again, you've satisfied the obligation. Even if you fail to do the other 3, you've fulfilled your obligation. How do you know that if you have, let's say, a carbonic service that requires multiple blood applications on the Mizbeach and you only did one? How do you know that you're Yotzei? Because the pasuk says, "V'dam zivachecha." Ultimately, again, the blood of your offerings you shall pour. So, yishapech al mizbach Hashem Elokecha. So again, it's singular. It's singular. V'dam. Even if there's only one blood application, ultimately, again, you are Yotzei. I will say, so again, remember, we saw that extensively in our Zvachim days, that any time that you require multiple blood applications, as long as B'di Evid you did one, you have satisfied your obligation. Incredible. I will say, Mishnah. Haparim, va'ilim, va'kvasim, va'skirim, in ma'ak bin ze'edzeh. Okay, so we'll say, so now, the Mishnah is talking about really the sacrificial service by carbon musaf. By carbon musaf. Now again, remember, you're bringing musaf on different days. You can bring musaf on Rosh Chodesh, you're bringing carbon musaf on Yomim Tovim, but carbon musaf often is comprised of parim, calves, cows, elim, rams, kvasim, sheep. So both say, so again, halacha, am I supposed to bring all of these animals? Again, for different types of carbon musafs at different times. So ultimately, again, if you only, let's say, have certain species but don't have others, you bring the ones that you can, and the inability to bring all of them does not preclude you from offering the ones that you have. That's what it means. It's not ma'akev. Rabbi Shimon says, "Im hayu lahem par merubim v'lo hayu lahem nesachim yavi par echad unesachim v'lo yakrivu kulam b'lo nesachim." So this is very interesting. Rabbi Shimon says the following: let's say you have enough money to purchase all of the necessary parim, but if you purchase all of the parim, you're not going to have any money for nesachim. So what should you do? So interestingly enough, Rabbi Shimon says it is better to go ahead and even only bring one par, but be able to bring nisachim. In other words, it's better not to bring all of the parim and utilize some of those funds in order to purchase the necessary nisachim. Okay, incredible. Says the Gemara, let's analyze. Hani paramul kvasim tehecha. So when we talk about paramul kvasim, what are we talking about over here? Like when are these being brought? To which the Gemara says, Hani, good. Rashi says over here, by the way, Hani, it's last Rashi, Rosh Chodesh v'atzeres sheksuvim b'chomesh ha'pikudim. So both remember again, specifically, let's see. The Gemara says, if we're talking about the offerings of Sukkos, it can't be. Why? Mishpat, kimishpatam kstiv b'hu. By the offerings of Sukkos, the Torah goes out of its way to use lashon of kimishpat in accordance with their laws, which tells us that Allah Chalamaysa, no deviation is permitted by the offerings of Sukkos. By the offerings of Sukkos, you got to bring it exactly as it's described in the Torah. Rather, it must be talking about the offerings of Rosh Chodesh and of Shavuos as spelled out in Chumash Bamidbar. Mem hey, 45 years say, Elim dehecha. Which Elim, right? Which rams are we talking about? Idano, the Ayu. So ultimately, again, Idano, if we're talking about these same ones, ultimately, and that's the Ayil is referencing. Ida Atzeres, the Torah's Kohanim. So again, so let's say if it's talking about these same ones, the Ayil, the Torah also is specific about the Ayil. Ida Atzeres, if it's talking about the Karbanos as spelled out by Shavuos in Torah's Kohanim, in Chumash Vayikra, Havia Ksivbo. It uses the lashon of Havia. Now let's remember again, whenever you see, we've seen this many times before, whenever you see a lashon of Havia, or right, Hayu, Yihiyu, what does that mean? Explosivity. It's got to be like this, and there is no room for deviation. The Olam Da'atzar Torah's Kohanim, really referring over here to the offerings of Shavuos as brought down in Chumash Vayikra. This is what it means to say, Lo elim the Torah's kohanim ma'akvi leila elim the chumash hapikudim. So ultimately, again, the ram offerings, as spelled out in Torah's kohanim says Vayikra, are not ma'akiv, the ones that are spelled out ultimately again in Chumash Bamidbar. Nor are the offerings spelled out in Chumash Bikudim in Bamidbar, ma'akiv, the ones that are spelled out in Vayikra. Rather, again, even the parim of any particular cohort are not ma'akev one on the other. The elim, the hacha v'hacha, hudalo ma'akvi. So, and the elim, both situations, right? Both Vayikra and Bamidbar, those groups are not ma'akev one on the other. Fine. The Gemara says inhu. Now again, inhu means the individual ram offerings. Ma'akvi. Those are ma'akev each other. So tana mili katani. Ultimately, the Rebbe say even though we're grouping all of these together, halacha l'maisa, they're all reckoned as separate, independent categories. Ubayom hachodesh. Okay, so we'll say. So now, watch what's going to happen over here. The Gemara is going to quote a whole bunch of psukim from Yechezkel. This is going to lead us actually on a really riveting journey on the Navi Yechezkel. So watch this. Navi says as follows. Ubiyom hachodesh tikach par ben bakar tamim v'shisha kavasim v'ayot tmimim yu par. Okay, so what was I saying? Now here, the Navi is describing a sacrificial service on Bayom HaChodesh. Now, Bayom HaChodesh sounds like what? Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara says, Matam Ulomar. So what is this referring to? The fish Nemar Torah Parim. So the Torah says Parim that you have to bring cows, right? You bring bulls on Rosh Chodesh. Again, now bulls, right? The minimum number of bulls is 2. So the Gemara says, maybe echad. How do you know that if you don't have 2, you could bring 1? Talmud Lomar par. Therefore, the pasuk says par singular. Even if you don't have 2, bring 1. Shisha kvasim. It says bring 6 kvasim. Mat Talmud Lomar. What is that coming to teach us? So we'll say now what the Gemara is doing over, just to understand, Yechezkel is also articulating or spelling out the sacrificial service for Rosh Chodesh. The Gemara is taking the statement of Yechezkel and contrasting it with the way the Torah outlines Rosh Chodesh service. So again, the Torah says parim. Yechezkel says par. So why is that? To teach us that even if you don't have 2, offer the one that you have. Next, so the Gemara says, Shisha kvasim. Why does it say 6 kvasim? Lefisha kasav Torah shiva. The Torah says you're supposed to bring 7 sheep. How do you know that if you don't have 7, you bring 6? Talmud Lomar shisha, because Yechezkel said 6. Yechezkel said 6. How do you know that if you don't have 6, but you bring 5 that you have? Then again, Gemara says, Chamisha yavi arba yavi shlosha yavi shnayim va'afilu echad. How do you know that at the end of the day, as much as you are supposed to go ahead and bring 7 sheep, I don't know that at the end of the day, even if you only have 1, bring the one that you have. Talmud Lomar v'lakvasim. Therefore, again, ultimately, Yechezkel says, and the sheep. Kasher tasig yado, whatever you got, right? Whatever you're able to go ahead and get your hands on, ultimately, again, then that's lashon of the pasuk, right? V'lakvasim asher tasig yado. Bring the kvasim, whatever you can get, whatever you could get your hands on, even if it's only 1. Although ideally it's 7, but even if you only get 1, that's fine as well. So we'll say. So again, what you begin to see is the way the Gemara is kind of playing the pasuk from Yechezkel off of the pasuk in the Torah, is that the Torah is kind of setting the ideal, and then Yechezkel is telling me in each and every circumstance, if I can't satisfy the ideal, do what you can. But if that's the case, right, that ideally it's 7 kvasim, and b'di eved, again the Navi tells me even just bring 1. Why does Yechezkel say bring 6? To which the Gemara says, the kama de'efshar lahadure mahadrinon. It's very simple, because we'll say, what's human nature? Human nature, it would be like this. Torah tells me I should bring 7, but b'diavad, I know that I could bring 1. So human nature often would dictate how many sheep are you going to bring? 1, right? Because therefore the Navi Yechezkel says, no, don't operate like that. Yes, there is a floor, and the floor is going to be 1. And b'diavad, if that's all you got, then you're fine. but don't live life like that. Don't live life just getting by with a minimal religious and spiritual standard, but rather, again, bring as many sheep as you can, as close to the 7 sheep standard. But again, at the end of the day, you're only obligated to do what is within reach. Incredible. And how do I know that these karbanos ultimately are ma'akev one the other? Therefore, the Gemara says yihiyu. Torah says, or Navi says yihiyu. This is what they shall be. So again, whenever we see yihiyu, yihiyu tells us that all of these offerings are required. Rashi says over here, Rashi is right across from Tosas Miluin. Im yesh lahem parim shnayim o kvasim shiva de'ein yucholim lahakriv zebelozeh. So remember again, you're thinking to yourself, what we just learned before, that they're not ma'akiv each other. So it's true. These karbanos, let's say of Rosh Chodesh, these karbanos are not ma'akiv each other when you don't have certain ones. So for example, if you don't have your kvasim, but all you have are your parim, okay, you bring what you have. Now what the Gemara is saying is, how do I know? Let's say I have all of these animals, but I decide, you know what? It's not ma'akiv, I'm not going to bring it. How do I know that if you have it and you don't bring it, it is ma'akev, that undermines the effectiveness of the karban? Talmud Lomar, yihiyu. Therefore, the pasuk says this is what it shall be. So we'll say, so it's fascinating. In other words, on one hand, if you don't have it, if let's say you don't have all of the animal groupings, you bring what you have, and you're yotze, and it's not ma'akev. And it's not ma'akev. On the other hand, if you have it and you fail to bring it, it is ma'akev. Incredible. So we'll say, so now that we started, so really fascinating. So just that interplay between the pasuk and Yecheskel, So we'll say, by the way, just to understand, it's obvious, but that is such a tremendous Musar Haskell. Like, in other words, halacha l'maisa, in life, if you don't have the ability to do certain things, okay, do what you can, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, shkoyach. If on the other hand, you have the ability to produce, but you choose to get by with a minimal standard, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, not good enough. Not good enough. You do what you can in life, but if you could produce more, and you know you could produce more, then that is not satisfactory divine service. An incredible Moshe Haskell. So we'll say, so now, just to understand what just happened over here is 2 psukim. One pasuk by Rosh Chodesh in the Torah, one pasuk by Rosh Chodesh by Yecheskel, and the Gemara just married the 2 psukim to use the pasuk in Yecheskel as a modifier on the pasuk in the Torah. Now that we opened up this story to Yecheskel, the Gemara is going to go down. Listen to this. Tikach par ben bakar tamim v'chitesa es hamikdash. Okay, so we'll say, so now watch what's happening over here. So still from Yecheskel. So let's just translate this pasuk. This is what Hashem said. Berishon be'echad chodesh, on the first, right? Now, first generally sounds like Chodesh Nisan. Be'echad chodesh, on the first of the month, Rosh Chodesh. Tikach par ben bakar tamim v'chitesa hamikdash. You will take a par, right, the calf, the son of the cow. V'chitesa hamikdash. V'chitesa means you will purify the Beis Hamikdash. So both say what this sounds like over here. Now what it sounds like, what Yechezkel is saying is that the par of Rosh Chodesh is a karban chatos, a sin offering. Okay. So the Gemara says, here's the problem. Chatos only. It's not true. It's not true. When you look in the Torah, the par of Rosh Chodesh is not a chatos. The par of Rosh Chodesh is an ola. So what's going on over here? So Yechezkel is calling it a chatos, but yet the Torah calls it an ola. Rabbi Yochanan, watch this, this is incredible. Rabbi Yochanan, parsha zu Eliyahu asid l'darsha. Wild. Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't know what Yechezkel is talking about. No idea why Yechezkel calls the par of Rosh Chodesh a chatos, when in fact it is an ola. Rather, again, Eliyahu Hanavi is going to have to interpret this for us. He doesn't have to interpret this for us. So the Gemara says, so incredible. So first of all, just there's so much to unpack in here. Which is that Lamaisa, life is obviously, we have this all the time. This is the Yisod of Teku. Life is about the ability to move forward with unanswered questions. We have this glaring contradiction between a pasuk in the Torah and the Navi Yecheskel. So what's the resolution? I don't know. But what do you do when you have unanswered questions in life? What do you do? What does a Yid do? Weiter. You move forward. We don't let unanswered questions paralyze us. We don't let the conundrums of the human condition somehow paralyze us into inactivity. They're good kashas, very good, legitimate questions we could keep on asking, but a yid lives by one word, weiter, forward. That's it. Nothing in life can paralyze you or sideline you from moving your life journey forward. Absolutely incredible. It also tells us that when Eliyahu comes, just like all the questions get answered, right? How many questions do we have in life? How many questions for thousands of years have we had? So we'll add this to the list. I don't know where on the list it is, right? But Lamaisa, just when Eliyahu comes, all of this is going to be answered. There will be a day of great light and great clarity. Rav says, no, it's not a kasha. Miluim hekrivu b'mei Ezra, kederach shekrivu b'mei Moshe. So we'll say, now watch this. Rav says like this. Yecheskel is referring to inauguration offerings. Now remember again, Yecheskel was talking about the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. During that time, there was an inauguration of the second temple, and as such, you had certain unique offerings. The same way when Moshe Rabbeinu inaugurated the Mishkan, there was a unique set of offerings that the offerings that Yecheskel are referring to are inauguration offerings, and therefore are different. They're different. You're right. Normally, again, the Par of Rosh Chodesh is an Ola. It's not a Chatos, but for the inauguration offerings, it was a Chatos. Incredible. Time that supports this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Parsha Zu Elio Asil Darsha. So again, same Bryce of course, Rabbi Yehuda says that we don't know how to reconcile the pasuk in the Torah with Yecheskel. Eliyahu Navi will interpret it. Amar Rabbi Yossi, it's not a kasha. Miluim hekrivu b'mei Ezra, kederach shekrivu b'mei Moshe. It's not a contradiction. It's two different karbanos, even though it's being offered up on Rosh Chodesh, but it's an inaugural offering, and in the inauguration service, the par was offered up as a chatos and not as an ola. So we'll say so incredible. Amar Lo, he said to him, Tanuach daitcha shenachta daiti. This is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. Ultimately, again, so Rabbi Yossi, so the Gemara says Rabbi Yossi gave this answer. Rabbi Yossi gave this answer, and ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan says, "Thank you. You know, I had such a kasha on this, but you settled my mind. You settled my mind, and in the schos, ultimately, again, that you gave me Yishuv Hadas." Ultimately, again, right, in mental, or we'll call it inner tranquility, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sherei Meretz Hashem give you inner tranquility. So again, it's fascinating. Rabbi Yochanan was all bothered by this question, and Rav Ashi, or again in the second version, Rabbi Yossi gave this answer that no, it's not a contradiction, but rather, again, it's just a different set of kabbalah. So on both sides, the bracha back to Rabbi Yossi is so beautiful. He says, Rabbi Yossi, you settled my mind. Ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you inner tranquility as well. Shabbos has a tremendous Musar skill as well. That sometimes the greatest thing that you could do for someone else is to give them a sense of inner tranquility. We know this, right? Because sometimes when you're having a difficult time in life, when someone is a friend and someone listens and someone helps to just kind of restore your sense of calm, that's the greatest gift you can give to someone. So here you can see it's fascinating. So Rabbi Yochanan is like in this state of existential angst because he does not have the ability to reconcile the pasuk in the Torah with the pasuk from Yecheskel. Rabbi Yossi comes along, Rabbi Yossi gives him reconciles it for him, and he says, "Thank you. You've given me the greatest gift." So I will say, which is so important because sometimes when we have someone who we love or a friend or someone we know in a state of distress, and you want to do something, sometimes the biggest thing that you could just do is be there for that person. Listen to that person. Tell the person, I'm here for you for whatever you need. This isn't Hilchos Avelos. You come to your Menachem Avol. What do you do when what do you do when you're Menachem Avol? What do you do when you console the mourner? What do you do? What do you do? Nothing. You sit there. You sit there because the whole Yisrael, you're not gonna deliver some pearl of theological wisdom that's gonna make their loss now I know why I suffered this loss. Thank you so much. I'm so happy you listened to that shir on your car on the way over. So now you have this profound insight to offer me. Keep your insights to yourself. No one needs it, right? Lemaisa, the best thing you could do for someone is just be there. Is just be there. And even if it's there in silence, not saying anything. Because sometimes when you give someone that just inner quietude, that inner tranquility of knowing that I'm not alone in this. Hinachta daiti, you gave me inner tranquility, because Baruch Hu should give you the same bracha as well. Incredible. So we'll say, so now I'm going to say, now it's all Yecheskel all the time. So now the Gemara is going through, we'll say over here something really interesting, which is there's a number of what appear to be just strange psukim in Yecheskel. So now we're just going to go through a number of them now. So listen to this. The pasuk says, pasuk says, any nevela, right, or treifa, from birds or from animals, kohanim should not eat. One second. That's pasuk in Yecheskel. Kohanim hu d'lo yochlu ha yisrael achli. I don't understand. So a kohen is not allowed to eat nevela. Kohen's not allowed to eat a treifa, but other people can. So the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan, listen to this. Parsha zu Elio asil l'darsha. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you're right. I don't know what this means. Eliyahu is going to interpret this for us. Ravina says, no. Kohanim itzricha. No, I'll explain to you what it means. Yecheskel had to say it by Kohanim. Why? So remember again, Kohanim are allowed to go ahead and, let's say, do malika on a bird. Now remember, Rabbi say malika is not a valid form of shchita. So you might have thought that since Kohanim could do malika and potentially consume that as well, therefore Allah lamaisa, maybe they could also eat nevela and treifa. It's an interesting havamina. Kamashbala, no. Kamashbala, that even though malika is permitted, Kohanim are still not permitted to go ahead and eat nevela and treifa. Incredible. Shiva b'chodesh meish shoge umipesi v'kavrasam esabayis Shiva. So we'll say, so now listen to this. The next pasuk, the Gemara quotes also from Yecheskel. V'chein sas, watch this. V'chein sas b'shiva b'chodesh. This is what you should do. Ultimately, again, on the 7th of the month, meish shoge umipesi, from a person who makes a mistake, as well as an ignorant person. V'chipartem esabayis, and ultimately, again, you shall atone for the home. So we'll say, so what is this? What is this referring? Now, once again, at first glance, ultimately, again, the pasuk doesn't seem to make sense. What is it talking about? So Rabbi Rabbi Yochanan says, this refers, also listen to this, this refers to a situation where 7 tribes sinned. What are you talking about here? We'll say back to our Zvachim days, Par Helam Davar Minat Tzibur. What's Par Helam Davar Minat Tzibur? Sanhedrin issues an erroneous ruling, and the majority of Klal Yisrael follows the ruling. What's the halacha? There's a unique sin offering that is brought. Remember, again, it's a communal sin offering, and that obviates the need for every individual to bring their own chatos. So Rabbi Yochanan says like this, what's called the majority of Klal Yisrael? What's the majority? If 7 tribes sin. Now, what's the chiddush of that? Now, watch this. The chiddush over here is, let's say 7 tribes sinned, but they're not the numerical majority of Klal Yisrael. Small tribes. So Rabbi Yochanan says that's what Yecheskel is saying. B'shiva. If 7 tribes sin, that's called the majority of Klal Yisrael, even if it's not a numerical majority, and will trigger par helam davar minat tzibur. Okay, im chidshu. Now, when does this happen? Chodesh, right? It only happens chodesh. What does chodesh mean? Chodesh doesn't mean month. Rather, what does chodesh mean? Im chidshu va'amru chelev mutar. Ultimately, again, when is their liability? If the Sanhedrin issued a novel erroneous ruling. For example, the Sanhedrin said chelev is mutar. So chodesh doesn't mean month. Chodesh means chiddush. They innovated an erroneous ruling. Meish shoge umi pasi, from a person who makes a mistake in a full melamed shein chayavin ela al helam davar shigigas maisa. And there's only liability for par helam davar minat tzibur when ultimately, again, helam davar, no one knew that the ruling was mistaken. Shigigas maisa. Shigigas maisa means they acted erroneously based on the erroneous ruling. So we'll say, so amazingly enough, we're reinterpreting that pasuk to refer to par helam davar minat tzibur. Incredible. Rav Yehuda said, Rav Zachar osa ish latov. The following man is remembered for good. And who is that? V'chanina ben Chizkiah shmo. His name is Chanina ben Chizkiah. Why? Not for him, Nignaz Sefer Yecheskel. Sefer Yecheskel would have been hidden away. Why? She'udvarev sosrim divrei Torah. Ultimately, again, why? Because it will say, as we've seen just in a couple of examples, the words of Yecheskel go ahead and contradict psukim in the Torah. Right? So what happened? What did this individual, Hananiah ben Yechizkiah, do? This will say, Ma'asa. What did he do? This is incredible. He took 300 barrels of oil. Took it up to the attic and went through Sefer Yecheskel. People say, what's the barrel of oils? The barrel of oils represent oil for a light. So what did he do? He pretty much, he amassed oil, he went up to the attic, and he just worked at it. He just went through the entirety of Sefer Yechezkel, the entirety of the Torah, and reconciled all of the psukim in Sefer Yechezkel to show ultimately again all the psukim that pose the contradiction, and showed ultimately again how they're not contradicting any of the laws of Torah. So we'll say it's incredible. Why does the Gemara have to say that he took up 300 barrels of oil? Just say, went up to the attic, he sat down, he reconciled it. So we'll say, so what does that represent? So 300 if you bring up 300 barrels of oil, then what won't you have to do? What won't you have to do? Stop and get more oil. So I will say, sometimes success in life is about ritzifos. It's about remaining committed to something and ultimately not getting distracted. Because the moment you get distracted is often when you just stop accomplishing the things you wanted to accomplish. That's why the Ramchal says that this is what's so important about zrizos. What is zrizos? He says because the way the Yetzer Hara works is you start something in your life and then what happens? You get distracted. And then what happens when you get distracted? Either you lose interest or you just get distracted and therefore you're on to the next thing. Zrizos is the midah where if you start something, finish it, bring it to completion. And I will say, this is perhaps one of the most challenging things we have in today's society. We are fundamentally distracted. We never pay full attention to anything. Whatever we're doing, we're always involved in something else. And it's all of us. All of us. It's not like a technology schmooze. It's just we're always involved. Think about the last time you actually did one thing for a sustained amount of time without looking at, glancing at, looking anything else. I don't know. I think it's virtually like our brains. I'm sure it's physiologically. We're just rewired in different ways. But I will say, understand the quality of your accomplishments suffer, and your ability to bring things to the finish line also suffers. Hananiah ben Chizkiah understood, I'm going to get this done. And I don't want to have to go downstairs to get more oil. Because the moment I have to go downstairs to get more oil, then the endeavor is going to suffer. Sometimes in life, if we want to be successful, we got to take all the oil with us, eliminate out the distractions, keep your head down, stay the course, and bring things to the finish line. Zrizos is the key to the accomplishment of our life initiative. Let's go back. Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon said in the Mishnah, and I remember Rabbi say, let's say you have enough money to bring all of the parim for, let's say, Rosh Chodesh, but then you won't have enough money for Nesachim. So Rabbi Shimon said, better to bring less parim and then bring some Nesachim as well. Tana Abonon, ve'efa lepar, ve'efa la'ayil, ya'asa mincha v'lakvasim asher tasig yado, v'shemen hin la'efa. Amr Rabbi Shimon, v'chimidas parim ve'elim achasi. So we'll say, interestingly enough, it makes it sound like the accompanying mincha, right? The accompanying minchas nesachim is the same ultimately again for the par and the elim, and that's not true. Ella, rather, what does it teach me? Ella shem hayu lahem parim merubin v'lo hayu nesachim. Rather, what it's teaching me is as follows: if you have enough money for all of the cows, right, but you don't have enough money for nesachim, then what should you do? Yaviu par echad unesachav. Bring one part, but bring nisachim also. Kulan below nisachim. But ultimately, again, do not bring all of the karbanos without the nisachim. So we'll say that's the choice. V'im hayulahem amud beis. V'im hayulahem elim merubim. And ultimately, again, if you had a lot of elim, v'lo hayulahem efasan, but you don't have enough for the mincha, yaviu ayil echad ve'efasan v'lo yikrevu kulan below efas. So we'll say the Gemara is creating a paradigm for me. And what's the paradigm? The paradigm ultimately is that if you have enough money for all of the animal sacrifices, but as a result will not have any money for the accompanying mincha offerings, it is better to go ahead and bring lesser animals, but be able to bring the accompanying minchas than to bring all of the animals without the accompanying minchas. All right, so we'll say, we will have to, by the way, incredible. Absolutely. We did more, actually, we surpassed. We did more than a blot today. Wrong blot in the cycle, right? But we did more than that. Listen, also, just to remind you, tonight, 8 o'clock, Rabbi Goldian will be here, Miras Hashem, for the presentation on tzitzis, tefillin, and mezuzahs. A number of you have asked me about bringing sons, bringing kids. Yes, absolutely. It's good for all ages. That's going to be tonight. Also, if you need your tefillin checked, Rabbi Goldian will be here, Miras Hashem, to be able to do that. That's 8 o'clock tonight. Miras Hashem, I think we're going to be in the double classroom right across. Shkayach Abosai, what a run. Incredible.